meeting for April 2nd. Would everyone please rise and pledge the flag? Can we please have a roll call?
Mr. Abdallah,
Here.
Mr. Azar,
Here.
Mrs. Henderson,
Here.
Mrs. Hillebrand, Mrs. Karam,
Here.
Mr. Moran,
Here.
Mr. Robeson,
Here.
Mrs. Tierney,
Here.
Mr. Acker.
Here. Okay. Can we please have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand, Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
8-0.
Okay, because we're going to have our friends from ICS and KCBA, talk to us, KCB, we're going to do public comments now, so if anyone would like to address the board or has questions, please let us know. Okay, Dr. Schaefer, the floor is yours.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to have Jim Kiefer come on up to the microphone. Jim is one of our architects, one of our lead architect working on the middle school project. He has a team. We meet bi-weekly and have done so for over a year now. And in front of you, you have Matt Kelly, who represents ICS, our construction management company. I have asked them to come today to talk about the bid process and bid strategy. This would be something that is very routine, and over the last couple months, we have seen factors that have impacted decisions around bid and bid strategy. I'm talking about tariffs. And tonight, we will be provided with the opportunity to learn about the bid process, to learn about an alternative bid strategy that we will be using, and then to provide the board with the opportunity to ask our experts in front of us some very specific questions inside that bid process, inside the alternative bid process as well. It's also important to know how we think about bid and how we think about this project, and to think about it as static would be wrong. It's very dynamic, every single aspect. And an example that I would give would be 7-8 months ago, the biggest risk that I thought was in front of us was interest rate risk. The lowest priority risk, and still a risk, is bid risk. And I had data to support that. In fact, I may have said 7 months ago, it may be in our best interest as we look as a finance committee to borrow as much money as we can as early as possible. And over time, we've seen some things in the market change where it may be more advantageous for us to wait as interest rate risk seems to have fallen as compared to or in contrast to bid risk. And I think that that's conventional wisdom as we've seen things like aluminum and steel and the controllers and the mechanicals have tariffs that impact the bid. And we have guidelines that we must follow relative to Act 34, which we may touch on today. So all that is important, and I say that to say we always keep an open mind. We always explore every option in front of us because you just never know what's around the corner. So with that said, I'm going to kick it off to Jim to start us off. And Jim and Matt may be going a little bit back and forth. And it's nice to see Matt here. It's nice on the TV. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm really here to just give you an overview of the bidding process. You might not.
Jim,
Yeah.
I made a mistake.
Oh, go ahead.
We have a principal and a student here that are going to present. We have one student, so we're going to have Miss Coyne come on up.
You got bumped, Jim.
This will be way more exciting than learning about the bid process.
I'm
Yes.
gonna go off the camera too.
Jim, you now have a tough act to follow.
Yes, it's a good hook. Kelly Coyne, principal at South Abington Elementary, here this evening with one of my amazing students, a current fourth grade student, Andrew, who would like to share some information regarding our PTA Service Committee. So our PTA is amazing and supportive, but there is a second branch to our PTA, our Service Committee, where we collaborate with high school students to come and join us for different projects and different activities. And Andrew has had the opportunity to participate in some of those activities. It just helps to build our relationship through the elementary, all the way through the high school, in our community, and prove to our students that any small act can really bring something great to someone's life, no matter how small that act is. So I'm going to help my friend Andrew, because, you know, speaking in front of people can be pretty nerve-wracking. So anything you need, I'm here for you. And you can talk right into the microphone, okay?
Good evening. I am here to talk about the Service Committee and PTA and how they have helped out our community and how I have also helped. We have done many things, such as making cards for seniors, fall leaf raking at the Clark Summit VFW, Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebrating for service bingo card activities, creating candygrams with candy hearts and papers, and making thank you cards for service dogs who attended reading night. We also have some upcoming events that include painting pots and rocks with the Interact Club to donate to Ellen Gardens, Abington Library, and Guino Merlin Center. A park cleanup with the 4th grade as a service project. Finally, a summer lemonade stand. These are some things that we will do and have done. So thank you, and that is what I have to say.
Thank you.
One important thing to mention is that Andrew's mother, Catherine, who's here with us this evening, is a pivotal piece of our PTA, but she also runs our service committee. One of the biggest things that we were able to do the last 2 years was a winter food drive, so that over winter break we were able to, and many of the students came to the school to help sort the food, and then it was distributed accordingly. And the Martin Luther King Bingo Service Project had many students this year participating, random acts of kindness, just to show the importance of service. So Catherine, combined with all of our other PTA members, and then our students and faculty and staff at South Abington, are very proud to represent Abington Heights in the realm of service, and we appreciate your support as well.
Andrew, Mrs. Coyne, yeah, hold on. Andrew, thank you very much for what you do for the community and for the school district.
All right, Jim, you need to provide some excellent examples of service and leadership. What's
As
that?
long as
No,
I get
no,
a certificate when I'm done.
Oh, we can arrange that.
All right. Matt and I are here to explain the bidding process to you guys, try to keep it very simple. It can get very complicated. And really to answer any questions you have, concerns you might have about the process. So this is a public school district, and therefore, because you're funded publicly, you have to follow public bidding rules and regulations. The state has a Public Bid Act, and basically, they say there's a structure for how you have to go out to bid. And the basic structure is they break the work down into at least 4 different contracts. And that's how we're going to bid it. There's a general contractor that's doing most of the work. There's an electrical contractor, a mechanical, and a plumbing contractor. They're individual contracts. Contracts are structured so that they have to work together and coordinate, but it is 4 separate entities. So at the same time, we're going to put all the documents out to bid to all 4 of these prime contractors. They will respond after about a month-long process with a bid. The bid is a lump sum guaranteed price. After looking at all the documents we provided, looking at the site, they come back and put in a price. We open those the day that they're received publicly and announce the results. So we may receive 5 general contractor bids. We're going to open them up, read them off. It's public information. The basic rule is the lowest responsible bidder would be the person that would be awarded the contract if you so choose. So the lowest price typically gets the job. For a job like this, not many of the contractors are going to put in a bid for this in general are qualified just because of the size and scope of the project. When we receive the bids, you have a board meeting where we will present a recommendation, but ultimately it's your choice. You can award the bids as presented or reject the bids. You're not committing to anything until you agree to award the contract, and at that point you're saying, yes, we will pay you X number of dollars to build this building. The cost of the job is for them to determine, but there are prevailing wages. The state sets minimum pay grades for every type of contractor that's on the project. So a journeyman electrician, there's an established rate. They have to at least pay that much. And that gets reported during construction to the construction manager to validate, yes, they are paying the prevailing wage or more. And really that's puts it in line with union scale labor. Okay? So a contractor that's going to work on this project can't come in with a super low bid and unqualified workers and do it's really helping to establish a quality level. If you elect not to not to award the bids, there could be, we could put it out to bid again. We could change something and rebid it. There's a lot of different scenarios that could come up once we open the bids. Most likely, we're going to see decent numbers that are going to be palatable to the district, and we would award those contracts. You have 60 days from when we open the bids to when you have to decide. Either we're going to award this or we're not. There's a separate contract going out for hazardous material removal. There is a small amount of material in the building that is going to be removed. So there's a 5th contract that ICS is bidding as well for that contractor to do that work simultaneously with the main project. Matt, do you want to add anything to the basic bid description?
Sure, just two things. One way we kind of weed out some of the less qualified contractors is we do require a 10% bid bond, which typically, the smaller guys will not bid because it's a decent sized project. So that helps qualify to be able to have better contractors. We want the best contractors here. But at the same time, we do have to take the low bid.
Matt, I'm sorry. Can you tell us what a bid bond is?
So it is a legal document that essentially the contractors will pay the 10%. So let's say the contract is $10 million. They have to secure 10% of that. So $1 million will be held for that 60-day period that Jim mentioned. And in the event that they pull out or decide not to bid, then the school district is able to pull that bid bond to help supplement the difference between that contract and then the next lowest bidder. So that $1 million goes to the next one. It's very rare that it ever happens, but it is set up to protect the district.
Thank you.
Yep. The other piece I was going to say was between when we get the bids and when we award, there is a portion of work that us and KCBA will do alongside, Dr. Schaefer, yourself, and the administration. The day of the bids, we will be able to tally everything up and see what the low bids are. But at that time, we still need to take the low bid and do what we call a D-scope. What that is just a meeting with the low bidder to make sure that he has all the scope and that he agrees to it. They technically have 2 days to pull out if they decide that there's a math error. That typically doesn't happen either. But our job is to make sure that that they have everything and that they're going to be the ones to be awarded. At that same time, we'll be, looking at what we have as alternates. And Jim, I don't want to steal your thunder here, but when we bid, we have alternate pricing. One of those alternates is to remove the gym from the building project. The reason for that is in case the price comes in too high, we have a lever that we can take to bring it back in to where it's under budget. It doesn't mean you don't have to take it. You can either, like you said, reject the bids, take the alternate to reduce the amount, or increase the budget. So there's several different options there. But we would meet at that point to kind of discuss the alternates and the pricing, and we can have a recommendation to award pretty quickly. Obviously, more conversation has to happen if the prices come in a little unfavorable. But
I want to take a step back to elementary bidding. When we put out the project, we have bid specifications. Can you just, in a nutshell, kind of explain that and what has all gone into the bid specs, including the level of detail?
So over the last year, we've been preparing the design documents, and there's two parts to that. There's the drawings, which is a thick stack of drawings showing the actual layout of everything. But that works in conjunction with the specification, which is a written description of each component that's in the project. So there's probably a book that's 1,000 pages long that describes what type of metal stud you're supposed to use and how it gets fastened and how you install it. There's a lot of technical information, what standards you have to follow, what the safety procedures are. All those things are in a technical spec. So there are probably over 100 sections for all these disciplines and all the components that are in the project. We're finishing up those sections now, and the part that Matt and his team are working on is what we call the front end. So there's a Division 0 and a Division 1. Division 0 is all the requirements of bidding. So there are very technical sections about what are the rules for bidding, the bid forms, the bid bonds, their insurance, things of that nature. Here are all the requirements that you have to follow to bid the project. And then Division 1 are the rules for how the contract is going to be enforced. So that's something that your legal team has taken a look at, and it describes a lot of how the contractors need to play nice in the same sandbox, how they resolve conflicts, how they interact with the architect and the construction manager and the school district. So that all gets put out to bid. We even give them, this is the contract that you will be asked to sign. We give everything up front to them so that when they give a bid, they're saying it includes everything. And the big point to that is we can't negotiate with them afterwards. When they give us a price, that's the price. We can't go back and say, hey, you know what, can you do it for a little less? No, that's illegal. You can't do that. We have to accept the bid or reject the bid. Okay? So the D-scope is to make sure that they didn't miss anything. Like double check, you're good with your number? Okay, you're good with your number. The school district's probably going to proceed. But there's no negotiation. If this was a private bid, there's a negotiation phase. We can't do that. With the alternates, all along this project, we've been tracking the cost and have been sharing a budget with the administration every step along the way. ICS has done a detailed takeoff of the project, and that they agree with the budget. We're in agreement on what the project should cost. However, things have dramatically changed in the last month or two, and our concern is, okay, that budget may not be effective anymore. That might not be what this comes in at. And so I came to the administrative team and said, I think we need to make an adjustment here. We need to have a strategy to deal with this. And the best strategy I thought of was to do an alternate to not build the gym. So the base bid is going to be a number to build everything, and the alternate bid is build everything but the gym addition, gym part of the addition. The logic there is we absolutely need the educational classrooms, STEM rooms, administrative offices. We got to build that. There is an athletic facility at the middle school. Having another gym really does improve a lot of the day-to-day workings of the school and gives another large gym that can be used for lots of extracurricular activities, but maybe it's not essential to the project in total. So it's not something we really want to do, but that's a $5 million deduct that we can get if we really see a large increase in bid costs. We needed to have a strategy where we had something significant to change, or we're going to have a problem with the budget. So I don't know what the bids are going to come in at, but we wanted to have a strategy to address it if it does come in high.
Jim, let's say that we have multiple bids on the base and multiple bids on the alternate, and we have a qualified person that has a lower bid on the base but doesn't have the lower bid on the alternate.
So you can choose whatever package of alternates you want. You could accept all of them, you could accept none of them, or any combination. That is up to the board to decide. Now, right now, there's 4 alternates, and it's for terrazzo versus another type of flooring in the classrooms or in the corridors. There's an alternate that's very complicated about the excavation, whether it's classified or unclassified excavation. And there'll be some for mechanical equipment. You can pick any combination of those you want. There is always a chance that when you pick a certain combination of alternates, it changes who your low bidder is. There might be company A that's the low bidder on the base bid, but if we take this alternate, oh, suddenly company B is the one who gets the job. It does happen. Maybe 5–10% of the time that does occur. But really, it's you structure what you want the project to be and what alternates to include. It's not up to the contractor, it's up to the board.
Thank you. Matt, there was another aspect, perhaps this is in the technical specs, and I want to be careful how I phrase it, given our history and the resolutions associated with it. It is prudent when working on a big project and having a construction manager to have a defined protocol to reconcile disagreements, i.e., I'm working on the floor and I'm looking at this sheet and it says from the architects, perhaps Jim says, this is the way it's supposed to be. And I look at it and I say, you know, Jim's wrong. It has to be this way. Matt, what does ICS do as our construction management team when something like that occurs?
Well, when something like that occurs, typically we would meet with the contractor and understand the situation, right? We want to see his side of the story, but then we want to look at the drawings will tell us if what Jim's saying is correct or what the contractor is saying is correct. So we take the time to analyze that, and really, if it's in the drawings, if it can be inferred to some extent, then we will kind of push back on them and make sure it happens. It's part of our job. There's a lot of gray areas sometimes, but we're the ones responsible to kind of try to make the clarification. If there is something that was missing on the drawing, we would submit what we call a RFI, a request for information, and that's where either the engineer or the architect would then respond. And at that point, it's a conversation if we believe that it's actually should have already been, it's a clarification, or if it's something added to the scope that wasn't picked up that would lead to some type of cost.
So
go ahead.
Sorry. It's accurate to say then that ICS as our construction management team is the arbiter of this dispute or disputes. Is that?
We will be the first one, or first line of defense, I could say. If it gets to a point where there's no one can agree, we won't agree, they won't agree, and then there would get into arbitration. That gets into more of the legal side of things. But to answer your question, the majority of the time we will make sure that we give you the right advice. If we think we want to be firm but fair, we want to make sure that if it's truly something missed and the contractors owed it, we will let you know that. But we're not just going to take their word for it. We're going to challenge them. They're going to have to prove to us that it's something that's out of scope.
And I'm just purposefully spending a little bit of time on this. So we had our construction attorney amend some of the contract, and I worked with Matt so that we would be in a position to make sure that we could reconcile disputes. So no one person can unilaterally make a decision that would impact the project and then get us into a position that we wouldn't want, to include how we resolve it, as he mentioned, with arbitration.
Yeah, the contract is structured using AIA documents, which are an industry standard set of documents that have developed over time to administer this exact type of contract. It has the mechanisms built into it for how issues are resolved and disputed. There is a lot of legal ease in the Division 1 and in the contract that explains exactly how the contractor is supposed to interact, the owner is supposed to interact, and the construction team.
So, Jim, obviously, we want the best and lowest cost, but we also want the best outcome. What criteria do you look at to try and separate the wheat from the chaff? What are you saying to the bidders that enables you to say only these bidders may qualify to bid?
So, lowest responsible bidder. Responsible is the key word.
Yeah.
As Matt explained, they have to float a bid bond. That's a big deal. That means they have to get a bonding company that will front them that amount of money. It's like, you know, an insurance policy. Hey, we've vetted this contractor, and okay, we'll put out a bond for them. So they have a track record, a history that they've performed on similar projects in the past. You know, to get a bond rating to do a $30 million project, you have to have done and successfully done other $30 million projects. So the size and the bonding requirements are really doing a lot to weed out contractors that might not have the experience level or the capacity to do a job like this. That being said, there are contractors in the market that, you know, hey, they know how to game this type of system. So, you know, there are contractors that are qualified to do this job, which we've had, you know, trouble with in the past. That might happen. But the key is there's contractual language in the documents to deal with those type of issues.
What about timing on the contract? Are there time they have to finish the work in a certain?
Yeah,
time?
so part of the front end is a summary of work that says this is when you're supposed to start, these are milestones along the way, and this is when you have to finish. It's called substantial completion. What's the finish date? And by contract, when they submit a bid, they're saying we will build it following that schedule. We will get it done by your deadline.
Gretchen?
Yeah, and if they do not do that, also, there is liquidated damages for a certain amount of money per day if they do not, you know, meet that substantial completion date.
And
So there's some,
Gretchen's going to be next, but you just mentioned something about liquidated damages, which is something that I talked with our construction attorney, Jeff Blake, about. So what that means is, you know, we'll be paid a sum of, I think, $2,500 a day per miss. So if they're, you know, 2 weeks out, they'll be paying us $2,500 a day. So that is something that is written into the contract. Ms. Anderson?
I'm not sure who I should be addressing this question to, but we just heard about the different safeguards that are being put into place to kind of weed out the lowest bidder, as you stated. So what are the safeguards that are in place if, for some reason, we end up getting, you know, have to take the lowest bid, obviously, but what if it's, you know, we get stuck with someone who's not a quality contractor? You know, what are some safeguards? Because we're still dealing with a legal issue from having to take the lowest bid from what's the pool, 2016?
Your biggest safeguard is you hired a professional ICS as a construction manager to handle those situations. They are your interface between the district and the contractors. They've worked on hundreds of projects like this and have tools to de-escalate these situations. And honestly, most situations get resolved in a construction trailer. That it goes to a legal avenue is extremely rare. So it's having your team in place. That's critical. We're not coming to you and saying, hey, we have a problem. What are you going to do? That's why you hired KCBA, and that's why you hired ICS to be the buffer.
And just one, I
thank
want to
you.
follow up with Ms. Henderson for a second. The big difference between something that happened in the past and what we're looking at now is ICS has a team of 4. One person, the foreman, is there 40 hours a week. So in this case, he is on the site and walking around checking day to day. And he has protocols that he reports that we see. So that would mitigate what we saw before, because it never would have got to that position. It would have been stopped immediately.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Yeah,
so
Go ahead.
just to kind of operationalize the example, though, I understand that there's things in the contract that protect us and the vendor, and there's legal things that we have access to, levers we could pull, buttons we could push if something happens. I think the point is to avoid those things from happening, because then you get in delays and then there's mudslinging and everything. In just from past experience, how do we know, like, who has to be where when things are tested, when things get turned on?
Sure.
Is that ICS?
Yeah, Matt,
Yes,
go ahead.
that's the ICS team here.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, well, like Dr. Schaefer mentioned, we will have a full-time person on site. We'll have a trailer on site. We'll be having weekly meetings, if not daily meetings, with the foreman and the other contractors, as well as weekly construction meetings, which we would bring in some of the district, as well as, the architect and engineer. So the biggest biggest way we can be successful is to communicate with each other, and as problems come up, we address them as soon as possible. And having somebody on site really helps drive that home. We also will have a project manager that's going to not be there every day, but he's going to be there to be the one that's more the arbitrator as far as, dealing with issues with the higher ups. So it's nice to have a good cop, bad cop type of situation. And myself, as well as the construction director, will be supporting those people as well to make sure it's a successful job.
Thanks, and that's what I was looking for, the project manager. But another example would be, let's say the specs are made and people agree to the specs and the materials are selected. Is there anything that would prevent a vendor from doing material substitution? Are there things in the contract that says if there's not this
Right.
type of material A, you could substitute B, if it's the same tensile strength or something like that?
So the technical specs establish performance standards, and we include multiple products that we feel meet those criteria. So it's an open spec, but we list, these are the products, these are the manufacturers we will accept. During bidding, the contractors, there's a month period between when we put out the drawings and when we open the bids. And during that whole time, the contractors are asking us questions. And during that time, one of the questions they can ask is, can I substitute this alternate material? If they submit it correctly, we will review it. If it is equal, we will let all the bidders know by addendum, yes, you can use this product as well. However, that is allowed during bidding. Once we accept the bids, we do not accept substitutes, because we need them to bid up front the cost of what the level of standard that we established. We don't want to have a mechanism where they can come in later and substitute a lesser product and you don't get what you paid for. So
Right.
substitutions during construction are really not allowed unless there's, extenuating circumstances like that carpet is discontinued, it is not made anymore, we have to pick something else. Okay. So it's not unreasonable, but there's a pretty
Yeah, and-
solid line on that.
Yeah, and all the contractors have to submit submittals, which are basically telling us what they're gonna purchase before they purchase it. So it's another check, just to make sure that they're providing what's in the specification.
Yep, so the bids are in, and we have 60 days to review, but we are required to take the lowest bid? Is that accurate?
Yes,
Responsible bid.
yes.
Okay, so what happens if we see that number and we see that contractor, but then we go and research that contractor and they're in quite a bit of litigation and there's major issues? Are we still required to go with that low bid?
I believe ICS has
Yep.
contractor qualification data
Yep.
that they have to submit as well as part of their bid, or if they're the lowest responsible bidder. There is another check and balance on that. Yes, if they have lawsuits out against them in other school districts, the solicitor's going to get involved, and we'll see how to proceed.
That's part of the qualifications. So I'm reading between the lines and thinking of other things that have happened. I asked Matt that question specifically. That is in the qualifications, where they would have to divulge any lawsuits, litigation. Matt, you may help me out here. I don't know specifically how that's written, but that is a piece to that.
Yeah, they'll provide financial information, references, divulge if any litigation has happened or they're within or having any of it. So that's correct.
And you both have drawn up the specs together, or?
It's a combination. The design team is writing all the technical specs, and ICS is writing the front end. So the rules for bidding and the rules to administer contracts.
So you mentioned when you were reviewing the actual bidding prices, you were comparable and you came back both with the price being pretty much the same ballpark?
So we've established a budget for the project, an estimate. ICS has done a detailed takeoff of our documents, our drawings that we've been preparing along the way, and have come up with their own estimate. Those two are in alignment. We both agree on what we think this project would cost. We're going to find out when we bid this what it really costs. We, have a lot of similar projects and a lot of history to reference for why we think it's going to cost what it does, but there are many variables when it comes to bidding. So, we're going to find out exactly what it costs, and really we're at the point where a lot of these questions about where are we at financially, well, we're going to know in 6 weeks when we open these bids exactly where we're at.
And what's the date of the opening of the bid?
I believe that's the
April 14th, closes May 15th.
Yeah.
May 15th. We're opening bids, and we're going out to bid on the 14th of April. 2 weeks.
That's soon, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Azar.
Great, yeah, I just had a couple questions. So the bidders have to post a bond, but are there any other pre-qualifications to bid, or can anybody bid that can post a bond?
Matt?
Technically, yes. Yes. Anyone that can put the bid up it's going to be advertised in the newspaper. We're going to also send it out, or give access to the electronic files, but anyone can technically bid on it as long as they meet the bidding requirements. So the other part is if the bidder comes in and say they don't provide a bid bond or they don't provide the qualifications, we do have the ability to throw those bids out. So they have, it's very strict on making sure that everybody provides the same information so that we can make a decision properly.
And do you throw them out before they bid, or do you throw them out
No.
after they bid?
After.
Yeah, so on bid day, everybody brings in an envelope or drops off an envelope, and we open those envelopes one at a time and read them aloud. Basically, the price of the base bid and the alternates, and then, making sure that the other information is also there. And then after that bid opening, that's when we would see if everything was provided. And if it wasn't, then we would probably throw that one out. And then at that point, we're deciding who's the lowest one.
So they don't actually,
Making a
they don't
recommendation.
have to give you anything prior to the bid date
So-
when they give you that envelope? You won't get any information on any of these bidders before the bid date?
They have to contact ICS to get the documents.
Right.
And that's really to get a list of, these are the contractors we think are bidding the project. I don't think they can submit a bid if they didn't pick up the drawings.
Right.
So
Right.
Know who they
we've sort of established, these are the contractors we think are gonna bid this.
Right.
Then there's a pre-bid meeting where we invite all the contractors out to the site. Matt and his team will go over all these bidding rules, make sure they understand what the project is, and they can walk around and look at the property. And that's a mandatory meeting. So if you didn't show up at the pre-bid meeting, you can't submit a bid. So you gotta pick up the drawings and you gotta show up at the meeting.
Right.
If they do both of those, most of those contractors are gonna submit a bid, but sometimes they don't.
Right.
Like, we won't know until we get the envelopes that day, who's actually bidding the job. We have a good idea, but there's always like, oh, they decided not to bid it.
Right.
And this guy we thought was on the fringe, well, yeah, they did submit a bid.
Right.
So,
So then when you get those bids, they're giving you qualifications on their firm, they're giving you the bond that they have to post, they're giving you a number. But
Yep.
other than that, everybody's bidding on the exact same contract, right? So there's
That-
not, you don't have
correct.
to evaluate the bids like this one's doing, they're all
Correct.
exactly the same with a number and whether or not they're qualified and creditworthy.
they're all bidding on the exact same documents, and the documents are thorough,
Right.
to include everything. The big rule there is they're responsible to build everything that's on the documents, but not something that's not on the documents. So if it's there, you're responsible to provide it.
Do they have to give you, in the qualifications for them, do they have to give you information, not just on their experience, but their creditworthiness? Like, do they have, a working capital line of access to X capital, or if they're a big company, a public rating or anything like that? Or is it all just on their experience?
Matt, do you want to?
There's financial information that's requested in the qualifications. I'd have to look at it exactly which financial, but it's fairly detailed of what we're asking for from it.
So the decision to boot somebody out of the process, where you say like, you're responsible, we have to take the lowest, I can't remember the word you used.
Lowest responsible.
Right?
Better, yeah.
So like, who picks who's responsible? Like, is it just, sounds like a subjective analysis by the experts, right? Like, you
Right.
guys pick that, like?
Yeah, KCBA and ICS will give a recommendation.
Right.
And honestly, if there's something amiss with a bidder and their qualifications, we're gonna be talking to the district solicitor about, do we accept this bid or not?
Okay.
So the recommendation would come to you from your professionals.
Got you. So I just have last two questions, and these are real quick. So if we bid this more than once, right, does it cost anything each time we bid it? Like, are there incremental costs to doing that? And then my last question is, if we don't want to move forward for whatever reason, like, we're not obligated to take the lowest bid, right? We just can't take a
Correct.
bid higher than that. We are not obligating ourselves by starting this process
No.
to do anything, correct?
You can elect not to award any of the contracts.
We can
and
just
the
stop.
project's
And
stopped.
pause or do
Right.
whatever we want, right? Okay.
Right.
But then about
So-
the cost to
so if
bid, is
you-
there a cost to bid twice?
If you rebid it, there are some costs. There was an advertisement that has to happen. It gets put in the paper. There's a small cost to advertise the bid. Your professionals have to do the service again, so there's a piece of our contract that is for bidding. So I would probably come back to you and say,
Right.
we're happy to bid it for you again, but there's an additional service for that.
Right.
And I would imagine from ICS.
Okay.
That, the risk is, if you don't change any of the requirements in your bid documents, you shouldn't really expect better results.
Right.
And as time goes on, cost doesn't go down, it goes up. So it's always something you have to calculate.
Thank you.
As far as change orders go, like what's the threshold that you approve them, when we would get involved, and what is acceptable?
Any construction project ultimately has issues that come up that there's cost adjustments. We've built into your project budget a contingency. There is a 5% design contingency in the overall project budget. And we highly recommend you hold that money for most of the construction period because there may be things that come up. So budget-wise, the district is prepared in their planning, their financial planning for additional costs. If there's a whole process that the contractors go through with ICS and KCBA to propose a cost, it's vetted. If we feel it's correct, then we would recommend it to the board. Yes, this is a legitimate additional cost. It should be paid. Some additional legitimate costs might come from you guys. A lot of times owners add things to the project. Hey, you know what? We actually want 10 more cameras. Can we add that? Sure, you can add it. There's a change order to pay the electrical contractor to do that. So
Ultimately, do you guys approve change orders?
right, so I sign change order, ICS signs change order, the contractor and the school district, all four parties agree on the change.
Thank you.
Anthony's question reminded me of another thing that we talked about in the pre-bid process that I haven't had the opportunity to talk to the board about, and I forget the official term, so forgive me. So if we took the building, turned it upside down, and shook it, what would fall out?
The FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So there's, in the project budget, we have money set aside to buy the furniture and equipment, so TVs and computers, and the big thing is all the furniture. We're getting all new furniture in the building. So that is also part of the budget, and that's not in what the contractors are providing, okay? That's in our soft costs, so that's, you guys are contracting directly with a furniture vendor and are gonna be purchasing all that furniture. So not everything in the project is in this bid. That's why we break down our budget and we show you, this is the construction costs. This is what you're gonna pay the contractors. And then there are some additional costs below that, which give you a total project cost.
So for example, Justin and his team in the technology committee, one of the things that we've been doing for the last 2 to 3 years is if you go in our classrooms, you see big 75-inch TVs, because we're able to use those as an instructional tool that's cost effective. Justin is able to purchase those through CoStars and other procurement methods at perhaps a cheaper rate. So it would be in our best interest to say, we are going to purchase the TVs, but yet we might say,
The contractor to install them.
correct, because at that point, we could tell that the installation, that juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? But ordering 175-inch TVs is. So those are the types of things that we've been going through to figure out what's the best place to do this, what should we purchase, where should we put them when they come in, who should install them, if it's us, is it cost effective? If not, is this something that we talk about the team to put into that scope?
So when you look at things like the mechanical contract, and Dr. Schaefer brings up a good point of co-stars, is it possible to purchase some of the mechanicals, perhaps boilers, AC units through co-stars and just go back to the contractor and say, you install it? Or do we have to have that called out in the bid as, before they bid?
It's possible. We haven't recommended you go that route. I think it's better for the district, for the contractor to purchase all of that equipment. So the responsibility's all on them. As soon as you purchase something, you are responsible for that coordination with all the other contractors. So you've taken on some risk associated with that possible cost savings. Matt, do you want to say any more about that?
I think you answered that well. That was what I would say.
You could, but I wouldn't recommend it. We are putting out the site lights separate, bidding that beforehand because we're worried we're not going to get them in time to be installed this summer. So there's something we did pull out, but that was really for timing, not so much about cost.
Relative to cost, as you mentioned before, while we didn't necessarily want to do it, we put the gym on an alt bid because we had identified a risk out there associated with the tariffs. I know you have limited information, but what are some of the areas that we might expect to go up in pricing as a result of some of the tariffs that we know? And then might there be some others that have maybe not been effectuated yet, but we are hearing about? I'm not going to hold you to it.
Basically, we don't know. It's new, it's unprecedented. There's not data out there yet. There haven't been enough bids received to really tell you what that is, but it's likely going to be more because the tariffs on steel and aluminum definitely affect the construction industry, and it's not just those like pure standalone products. There's all kinds of steel and aluminum in all the electrical and mechanical components. So all the vendors that are building pieces of equipment that are going into your building, their raw material costs are going up. So it's sort of across the industry. It has a lot of effect. And also, you know, tariffs on Mexico and tariffs from Canada, most construction manufacturers, they're international companies. They are not just working in Sandusky, Ohio. They are buying material from here and from there and assembling it, and they might assemble this piece there and that piece there, and it all comes together. So it's going to have a wide effect. It's not just this product or that product. It's going to affect a lot, but how much, we don't know. And there's a lot of variables to bidding. The bidding climate is more art than science sometimes. There's a lot of variables that we don't know about. How hungry are contractors? Do they need this job so that they don't have to lay off 10 guys next week? There's all kinds of issues that go on in a bid that we don't know about. So anyway.
So you had you taught me a lesson. I learned something in one of our meetings as we talked about this. When I had mentioned a 25% tariff, and you said, Chris, you have to remember that that's not all passed on to you.
Right.
Can you kind of reiterate that example, because that helped me to operationalize tariffs a little better?
Sure. So when we get our contractors on board, they're going to give us a schedule of values, and they list all the different products that they're buying all the subcontracts, like the flooring, and they're gonna say how much it costs. So we get this breakdown of all the material costs. And that usually is about half of the money. So when you are hiring a contractor, about half of the money is going to buy this stuff to build it, and the other half is the labor. So if a tariff is affecting, it only affects one side of the equation. It's only on the material. So only half of your project is impacted by a tariff increase. So I would say the rule is, well, you can take the tariff and cut it in half. And that's what you could expect. Potentially, it could go up. It's not the full amount. It's not like a 25% tariff means 25% higher building price. I don't think that's true. Our labor costs are still the same, and they're established by the state. Just because the material went up doesn't mean the labor goes up accordingly.
So Alcoa in Pittsburgh gets raw aluminum from Canada. That raw aluminum comes in, and then they fabricate it to put the frame around the window.
Right.
The tariff exists on the raw material coming in and not on the people in Pittsburgh fabricating.
Right.
Mr. Azar.
If a bidder submit or tries to submit, I don't know if they even try to do this, but like the contract is the contract, but if a bidder tries to submit an alternate bid, like they submit the contract bid, but then they say, well, we'll also do, like we'll bid this, but if we can have some price flex, this is how low we can go. Like we can't even accept a bid like that, correct?
No, we'd have to toss it out.
Right.
It's very rigid. They have to follow the rules of the bid.
Yep.
And they have to submit their bid form correctly.
Right.
If they have even a small error on their bid form,
Right.
probably needs to be tossed out.
So then, if, another question, if, there's certain language in the, I'm not familiar with the AA contract, but, I imagine that there are things in there for acts of God, war, that could cause them to delay the project, right? So is there any language in this contract that could remotely resemble, like what we're, like this hasn't happened in a long time, these kind of tariffs? Like, is there anything in the contract where like they're gonna potentially, a year from now, like, what if the tariffs go up to 100%? Like,
Right.
can they point at something and say, hey, this is in the contract, this is a material adverse change, like, you know, we're not moving, like, is there anything that they can do?
This is new ground. The bid is structured so that when they give you a price and submit the price, that's the price. And there is no escalation allowed in the contract.
Just delays, or certain delays are allowed, but not an escalation.
Now, if tariffs double or triple after you've awarded them the contract, I don't know. We're in a weird place.
Yeah. We'll probably be in court.
The whole country will be in court.
Well, that was really my question as well. So, April 15th, we received bids.
No,
and
we put out.
we put out the bid. They have May 15th. How possible are these contractors able to put the prices in where they have no idea how much it's? So nothing really is going to be accurate.
They have to submit it, they have to speculate on what they think they're going to have to purchase these materials for. And obviously, they're going to try to buy things as soon as they can and not wait a year from now to buy something. But they are speculating. And so that's where we really see the bid could fluctuate higher because they don't know potentially what they have to buy. They're going to get a bid from a window supplier on bid day, and they'll use that number, but that's not when they're buying it. So when they're buying, they have to calculate how much it might be when they have to buy it.
Would-
Common sense says in those cases, they will most likely hedge their bet
Yes.
and put in higher prices for material, although
Yes,
perhaps if they're really hungry, they may say, We'll take a chance."
Right.
Conversely, they could, well, not, that, however, and maybe I've got the wrong perception. They put in a bid that perhaps I think may be aggressive, and then they go back to their distributor and say,
yes,
I need 5% off, and that's where they make the coin.
right. They could short sell, you know, the job themselves. Like, I speculate these things are gonna go away, and I'm gonna put in a low price, and, you know, I'll take the gamble that tariffs are gonna be turned off next month. We don't know. But we don't know, and that's, I'm sorry I don't have, you know, better information than that. We've recognized that there's this potential problem, and we wanted to have a strategy in our bid to deal with it. That's why we're doing the big alternate.
Would it be wise to consider putting off the bidding process for a little while? Would time make any difference here?
No. All of this is, we don't know. And the best thing we can do is bid it, and then we know what the price is. We're gonna see how many bidders respond, how close those bids are, what the true price of this is. You're not locked into accepting the bids. It's in your best interest to bid the project and see where you're at, because everything else is speculation at this point. It's better to have
We're in the
a
final
known
10 meters of a 400-meter race. We can finish it out, and we get a number. And we don't, the board doesn't have to take it, but at least we know. It's not speculation anymore. And quite frankly, we've paid a lion's share of the money for this process, and we're just down to the point where the bid documents are at 95% complete. So we're just in the final phases of, we are gonna release it in 12 days. And we're just at that point waiting for them to come in.
Well, and I think we've even established, even if you take the tariffs out of the equation, you know, the price of everything is going up every single day. I mean, we could have, I think when someone did the math, we could have built an entire middle school back in, 2019, 2020. So even if we take the tariffs out, I think it's still a gamble the more, you know, we delay and put off. I think it's nice just to be able to have that number and be able to decide how we're going to proceed.
Right, and I, exactly, to that point, and I've said this over and over, and illustrated with some percentages, is since 2020, construction costs have gone up 90%. We could have built for 243 a square foot. Right now, we're close to 415 a square foot. So Jim was absolutely accurate when he said it's starting to plateau. When I say plateau, it hasn't had those 20% increases that we saw, but make no mistake, it will be more expensive next year as compared to this year. The only variable that we could pray for that is also out of our control would be interest rates. You know? Right. If the gods came down and gave us 0, then that would change things dramatically. But any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Matt, thanks a lot for the time. I hope this was informative for all of our board members as well as our audience
you, everybody.
members. Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks a lot, Matt.
Thank you very much.
At this time, I'd like to call up Dr. Tioni, who will be providing a presentation to the high school. So give us a second while we get this all set up. Yeah, it's a little janky.
we assembled a committee, a little bit before Christmas. We started meeting after Christmas. These are all the teachers and support staff and admin that sat on the committee. We met every other week on Tuesdays after school to discuss kind of, you know, what the faculty is feeling. The faculty as a whole was surveyed. We discussed the elements of the survey. We brainstorm different ideas. So I just want to publicly give thank you to all of the committee members that, you know, sat and brought this forward as a concern. For those of us that haven't been around as long, the current scheduling that we're under started in 2015-16. I was a member of the admin team at that time. It originally was a 57-minute study hall at the end of the day. A lot of that kind of had to do with us just onboarding the one-to-one and kids having to return Chromebooks and things like that and checking at the end of the day. We realized that there were some gripes at that point that the study hall was longer than the academic time that the students were sitting there. So we readjusted that in 17-18, shortened it by 10 minutes, got it to a 47-minute study hall. Then when we had the risk assessment completed, they said no more crossing outside, which used to be an option. You would be able to leave the doors by the guidance and cut across the parking lot to go to the gym.
Can you stand in front of the mic? I don't think the people at home can hear you.
Okay, that's fine.
There you go.
I'm sorry, guys. So then after that risk assessment study, we were asked to peel it back so that we could give the students a 5-minute passing time. So it reduced it to 37-minute study halls. When we onboarded the current schedule that we have, the common goal, like one of the original goals, was to have common planning time for our teachers to collaborate and discuss student concerns. The time for teachers to work one-on-one with their learners that were identified as struggling the most. Prior to that change that we made back in 15-16, we've had I've experienced two different other iterations of a schedule in which juniors and seniors had something called the open block, where for 2 periods a day, juniors and seniors were just free to roam a portion of the building. They could get their lunch, they can hang out in the library, and then 9th and 10th were sitting in academic classes or in a study hall. So there was that schedule, and then there was also the traditional study halls dispersed throughout the school day. So that's just a historical look back on where we've been in probably the last 12-ish years. The current deficits to that schedule, what we looked at is that the period 9 is only 37 minutes, and that's shorter than the other academic periods that we have, 1 through 8. Students that do take classes during period 9, and we have 2 subsets of classes that happen. We have music classes that are happening during period 9. We currently have about 95 students taking a class for credit in period 9. And because that's the only place that they can get that elective, some of the sections are overcrowded. We also have learning support classes happening during that period. And with those classes being 6 less minutes, they're missing that much intervention time per day, which when you look over the course of the school year, it totals up to about 25 class periods that those students miss compared to their peers that get to have it scheduled elsewhere in their day. So those are the 2 deficits that we're really looking to capitalize on this slide, and there's more on the next slide. We've noticed since COVID that there's been an increase in parent excusals for period 9 outside of those who are already off campus. So currently, there's 114 students that are scheduled for off campus that are in grades 10 and 11. This past year, I was tasked with, one of the building goals was to really shut that down, keep kids in the building. So we really framed it to the 9th graders like, you guys aren't going anywhere. You're in, you need this intervention. You need to learn how to study. You need time to figure out who you are as a learner, to organize your life. And then the 10th and 11th graders, we were really strict and stringent with it, but there's certain situations in which, you know, they got creative and the parents just started to write notes. On average, we see 40 notes per day. So that's a process our front office has to process in addition to all of the other excusals, dismissals, all of that, just additional notes per day. just for period 9. So I included a spreadsheet to that data as well. When you have that many students walking out the doors at 2:45, students are really good at looking like other students and just acting like they belong. So we tend to find some kids just walking out with everybody else that's walking out the door because, I mean, they're kids. And, you know, I get it. Sometimes it's nice outside and they don't want to sit in school. So, and it's hard for us to manage that because there's so many other kids walking out the door at that time. You know, it's hard for teachers who are standing in the hallway to know if should they be leaving or should they not be leaving. So that's another deficit to our current schedule. With our change, our you know, it's to even out, like all of our classes will be the same length. Students, you know, that are taking the music class or, you know, demonstrate that they have the ability to manage an extra class, they could fit that in. It's allowing us to schedule, each student has to schedule 7 credits. So the flexibility to have not as many courses run in opposition when you're trying to schedule 7 across an 8-period day versus scheduling 7 courses across a 9-period day. It allows for a little bit more flexibility to get students into those courses. We also are hoping to increase our enrollment to elective classes. I've included a spreadsheet there, and we could take a minute to look at that once I go through the other expected outcomes. A lot of our elective students have to make difficult decisions of like what I'm going to put in my schedule, and sometimes in the summer we're making a lot of phone calls saying like, hey, this is a singleton, this is running in opposition to this, and our seat counts in our elective classes aren't as high as they could be. So we're hoping that this encourages engagement for students and they're maximizing opportunities within their school day to sit in our really great programming and all of the niche little kind of fields and areas of study that we have lined up for students. Study halls throughout the day will help students learn to prioritize their responsibilities and stay engaged in their education. What we sometimes find at the end of the day is that they're shot. They get to the end of the day and it's like, yeah, I know I have that thing to do, but I just kind of need a brain break at this point. And then a 5-minute brain break turns into a 15-minute brain break, turns into the whole study hall. I've just taken a brain break and I've not really started anything. So we're hoping by moving that throughout their day, it'll be a little bit more productive for them, and they can say like, oh, I got this assignment this morning, I can work on this and move this off my plate while they still have their energy and it's fresh in their mind. The other piece that we're looking to improve is the accountability for students. Right now, they have 2 teachers covering their study hall. So if they are like waiting or like looking to make an appointment for another teacher, the teacher's like, well, which teacher do I say, hey, they need to come to see me to make up a test or this, that, and the other thing? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I have, you know, this teacher today or that teacher today because it's on a different cycle. It's not an alternating day. Some teachers are covering the study hall, you know, like 1, 2, and 5, while other ones have a schedule where it's like 1, 4, and 6, right? So they never know which teacher unless they're paying attention to the cycle day. So we're hoping by having a consistent one teacher, those interactions and those engagements with that one teacher, you know, improves outcomes for students. And then we also think we'll have an opportunity with the flexibility. Right now we're covering 30 study halls with probably about 70 teachers. We'll be able to thin those study halls out, have more teachers cover them, but then still have an opportunity to run math clinic, which would be a drop-in place or a writer center. And these are throwback terms to what used to exist in our schedule when I got to Abington, you know, over a decade ago. And it's just a place like you're somewhere throughout the day, whether it's lunch period or your study hall and you're working on an essay or you're working on something, you have access to somebody who can help, you know, read your assignment or look at your math work or help you with anything that you may need, in addition to your study hall teachers and any teacher that's on your schedule. You probably, if you don't live our schedule, you won't see the times and how they change. We did allow, the reason we shifted homeroom to after, like it's going to be included in second period, is because senior privilege used to only be the last period of the day. We're going to allow for flexibility in which seniors can come in late or they can leave early. And the reason why we went to this is because what we're seeing is a lot of the students are leaving, you know, for senior privilege, but they're not actually leaving campus. They're just kind of hanging out in their car and waiting for their after-school practice to start. Because it's like not enough time to go all the way home, to get all the way back, to get the parking spot, to get to practice, to get changed, to do the thing. Or some of them are trying to scoot home to get back to practice, and it's creating a lot of back and flow, and they're rushing, and you know, there's haste there. So we do think a lot of seniors will take advantage of that late start and shift that senior privilege to the morning, and then just finish their academic day and head right out to whatever practice they have or any extracurricular. What really allowed us to kind of look at something like this too was that, you know, Dr. Koss, which you haven't voted upon yet, so I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but the academic calendar for next year has days built in which we have PD in a full day programming, so I'll have more access to my teachers to do that PD work with them that we were getting occasionally to do in the period 9. But not always with fidelity because I didn't always have access to all of my teachers. So now by having those days in that calendar, even though I'm taking away some of the common planning time that has existed, it's been naturally built back in with the calendar that's been created. Absolutely. Yep. So students, just so you could like tabletop it in your mind, when the seniors come in late, you know, the expectation is like if they have senior privilege, we're gonna have like a little coffee clutch, for lack of a better word, in the cafeteria for them to hang out and get in there. She'll still have the coffee station set up for them. And then as it approaches time for them to go to their second period, we'll release them. All of the senior lockers are in the A hall, so they'll just have to walk down the main hall into that English hall and get their stuff and then head out and be in homeroom by 9:05. And we thought that was a nice crisp start time, like you have to be in your class by 9:05, and then we'll run the regular, here's your morning announcements, take attendance, those managerial tasks that typically happen at the start of the day will now happen second period. Gretchen.
I don't know if you know this yet, and I don't know that it makes that much difference, but will their homeroom teachers be like, did you say they will remain in period 1 and that'll be like their homeroom?
No, period 1 will just be a class.
Class.
The bell will ring, whole hopefully all the seniors are in by then, everybody goes to second period, take attendance.
Okay,
building
so homeroom is,
in second period.
Okay,
Yep,
I
it's
see.
not a separate location, it'll now be the second period.
okay, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
And I mean, I guess a comment too. As a parent, I have to say, like, I like this. There is a lot of, you know, the benefit of having that 9th period universal study hall is nice because you can make doctor's appointments and stuff like that, predictability. But I think you're right, like, kids are either leaving or they're completely checked out by the end of the day. My one question is, you know, we have a lot of student athletes. So the benefit of having the universal study hall at, you know, 9th period is that when they're leaving for an away game, they're not missing instructional time. I just don't know if it will be a consideration with the athletic department. I mean, I know a lot goes into, you know, scheduling away games, and we only have so much flexibility when it comes to scheduling a game on someone else's field. But I do think that's a consideration if maybe we can get some of the away games to start a little bit later, if that's a request that can be made through the athletic department, just because I think, you know, sometimes they have like 2 away games or meets or matches a week, and that does add up. They're going to miss a considerable amount of instructional time during that,
Yeah,
during that block.
absolutely. And it used to be, I feel like it used to be a lot more, but now that most districts have gone to like turf and lights, there's not that race to beat the sunlight, you know, and get
Right.
the game in before then. And then the busing constraints have also played a factor in like when we can leave. So we haven't been having as many early dismissals. And as I remember back in the day, but that is absolutely something that Enrico and I have spoken about. And I think that is, you know, we enter into these 2-year cycles. So as we're planning that out and like looking at that, and, you know, we're friendly with all of our competitors. So I hope that is something that we could work together on. Unfortunately, like we have DV in our, you know, so like
Yep.
there's very little you could do about that.
Right.
And then even some of the Wilkes-Barre Valley schools, like down there, like, you know, sometimes it's, you know, you have competing events. You have to have 3 events in one night, and so sometimes we are at their will, so.
Right. Thank you. And then, you know, I know another benefit of having everyone having ninth mod at the same time, study hall at the same time, is that a student can go to their teacher for help, and most often their teacher's available. I love like the reading and the math, you know, clinics. But so what will offset, like if I need to go get help in a subject, but my study hall is different, like at the same time that I need the help from that teacher, they're teaching, what will offset that? Because I know like we want to make sure that their planning time is still protected time, they deserve that time. So what will the recommendation be if a student needs help?
So sometimes the way that they handle that is like depending upon when the student's lunch is or what the schedule looks like. And then sometimes it just happens that like there's time within that embedded, that student's like study hall in which they could see where their teacher's at and what teacher they need help with. We found in years past, again, I'm speaking, you know, in previous years, that the math clinic was rewarding for kids, right? Because sometimes it's like you need to hear it from another person.
From a different source, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I
so
like that.
there is a benefit to that as well. And then, you know, the teachers are going to be on duties in the cafeteria or throughout the building throughout the day, just as they currently are. So you'll still have access to your people. And then I think like in the morning, there's time for them to go and see their teacher, even if it's like for the 10 minutes that they can get up there and say like, hey, I was struggling with this. And it's like, we'll get to that today in class, make sure we ask about that. So I think you're still gonna have the same amount of access to your students and the students to the teachers. It's going to be a change in their mindset of how they do it. And I think, you know, that they'll figure that out and the teachers will encourage them when to come and when it's available and when it works for the teacher. Like you could absolutely come to class and sit there and while we're working on this, you know, or if they're giving a test in one of their other classes or something like that, there'll still be access to that, so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I also have a student that struggles with that night period study hall, but I also would be the kind of student that would probably go right in and do his homework. So
Mhm.
this could be a really effective change. I do worry that this is coming from someone who generally is an overachiever and worked with a lot of overachievers in my career. If we sort of take out this study hall, are we just going to have that certain peer group of kids pack their schedules and I don't know, almost like a cultural shift.
Like this is what I have to do.
Yeah, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily to their advantage,
It's
but that is how.
Their mindset works, yeah. I think a lot of the courses that they chase down are not going to always be available in that assortment or in that functional equation, right? Like the things that students want, like especially in your upper level languages, we're running one per up, like, you know what I'm saying? So like if it runs opposition, you know, to any of our higher level sciences or any of our higher level maths, like I have one BC calculus. Like you can't just load in another calculus because the other constraint is that my teachers can only teach 6 and they can't have more than 4 different classes.
But but you added a period to mitigate that algorithmic risk factor, correct? Like you wanted to have the opportunity to disperse
Yes.
study hall, which would mathematically provide you perhaps with more
Flexibility
room
to
so
have them
that-
do it. But the course will still only run perhaps
but
once,
what I'm
yeah.
saying is you believe that you would have
Flexibility.
more optionality with
Correct.
this schedule.
But with the singletons will still be the singletons. But I think it may be able to fall in a way in which kids will have more access where they won't come up against the constraints that we've been experiencing.
Correct.
Yes.
I'm more talking about. I always have this on and I turned it off. I'm more talking about the kid who, and maybe this is a minority. I was nerdy, but like I'm thinking about my academic career, and I would take Spanish 1. Like in addition,
Just to-
in my junior year, just to
diversify.
fill out my, academic scorecard. And I don't know that that's, I know I saw Pete Smith on there. Like, are we going to have these conversations with kids about?
So Pete, the way that they counsel the whole counseling department, they go out and they make academic presentations to all of the classrooms. So that already happened last month, right? And they really talk about not just putting courses in a stack, but having it be meaningful opportunities for learning, right? Don't just say, I took this and I took it and I checked it off. And I think our counseling department does a really great job of like, I don't want to say coaching, but coaching them into a pathway that meets their needs and who they are as a learner, and then who they want to become as a post-secondary learner or whatever that may be. So I think that those conversations just naturally happen already within our counseling department. This used to be a thing that only was allowed for music, and I think that isn't always fair too, that some kids don't love music, right? So I think we need to find something that works for everybody. And if it fits for a kid and they're academically stable enough to chase it down and it is meaningful for them, I think that I shouldn't be limiting their opportunities for it.
And for the record, I just because my oldest is now in the high school, like the conversations that I've had at home reflect really highly on the conversations you are having, exactly as you described. You know, how they're learning and what their future looks like, and so that's fantastic.
Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. Greg?
I know my daughter will kill me after she hears I say this, but what's the purpose of senior privilege? Wouldn't it be more advantageous for the students to be in an additional academic class?
I don't disagree with you. I think that we're up against a time-honored tradition here, and where it's been.
Just because it's culture doesn't mean it's right.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question.
It's a great question. I think where it existed from, it wasn't something that existed in my experience and where I went to high school. I think it existed because so many kids do work experience now. We have partnerships with CTC, partnerships with Johnson College. We have students going out to the elementary schools, the athletic interns, all of those other experience. So many kids are taking advantage of those. So it was like something that was like an opportunity for kids that were choosing an academic workload. You still got to kind of break up your day and leave at the end of the day. We looked at a schedule. North Pocono does an AM privilege or a PM privilege. So that is something that was brought forward by a committee member. Like, we know the school's already doing it. And we're excited to see where it goes. And it's only going to be available for kids. Like right now, we pull students, seniors, who are in danger of not graduating. It's called a privilege for a reason. It easily gets taken away from you, too, because our first and primary focus is making sure you receive your education. So we pull the parking privilege first, and then when that doesn't work out for you, then we pull back your senior privilege, and we spend time with you during period 9 to make sure we can get you across that stage in June.
Sorry, it'll be another not popular question.
It's fine.
So for work experience, now with the availability to have additional classes, more diverse classes throughout the day, the value of being at the school rather than in a work experience may be more beneficial, right? In addition, I'm not familiar with the rigor we put behind validating that experience is happening, or the quality of experience what is that adding to enrich the child? And so I guess my question is, how does this impact work experience, and then how do we validate that experience is a worthwhile trade-off for what they're
How do you monitor the efficacy
of work
that?
experience?
Yes.
So the work experience is monitored through our guidance department, and they have to fill out a packet. It's like an application packet. And then every week, the supervisor at their job has to submit the forms and the hours, and the student has to maintain 20 hours of employment. And then the guidance counselor then communicates with that supervisor, and then they get like an evaluation worksheet on that student, and that's how we submit the passing and failing for each quarter for that student. So the student self-selects the work that counts as work experience, like whatever that job is. It doesn't have to be related to post-secondary planning. It is just somebody that may be entering the job force after graduation, so we don't really say this is where you have to land. Those other internship experiences, that is more kind of job matched into your interests. But all of the work experience is monitored through the guidance department and cooperation with the supervisor that each student is working with. You're welcome.
So the seniors, when they have senior privilege now, do they have to leave the building?
They are expected to leave the building.
So they're expected to leave the building. So when you're going to give them senior privilege in the morning, are you expecting them to stay out of the building until right before homeroom?
Well, we will let them to come into the cafeteria. Like I talked about the coffee clutch, like when they come in, our doors are locked at that point, so they'll have to kind of get buzzed in by our person in the morning that sits at the receptionist desk. And then they'll go right to the cafeteria, which will be monitored.
And then they'll go to homeroom?
And then, yep.
So like and I know it's culture, but like the spirit of, you know, Greg, it won't be popular in my house either. But the spirit of senior privilege, like, is it really like just because they're seniors, they should have it, or was it driven by work experience, like the kids that might use it for work experience, or?
Senior privilege is not driven by work experience. Work experience is something that is like standalone.
Right.
I think where it was born from, I wasn't here when senior privilege started, but I think the nature of it was you are entering your senior year, you already have 21 credits.
Right.
You only need another, 2.5 credits to graduate. As long as you're in academic good standing and you're doing everything you need to do,
Right.
maintaining your good grades, we'll cut you free after 8th period. I think that's where it was born from.
Dr. Tierney, and graduation requirements are the what expectation?
Am I filling in the blank?
Yes. They're the blank expectation.
Firing squad.
The first?
Are the minimum?
Yes, yes, I just wanted to.
It was like password. I was
Yes, I
like-
know, right.
So, wasn't there
Yes,
some?
so I mean, I think that, there are days that I'm not very popular, right? But I
Right.
think if we're gonna change this, like, it needs to be slow and incremental, and removing senior privilege is like not off the talking point, but like, I think that.
Is it popular with the faculty, or is it popular with the students, or is it,
I'd say it's a mixture of both.
like, do they,
It's a mixture of both,
mixture of
right? I
both.
mean, yeah, no, I told them they wouldn't have to speak. I think, so there were some like weird things that were happening with COVID, and I know like some of you didn't have high schoolers at that time, but like when COVID happened, we were just letting everybody loose after that because it was like social distancing. Your kids were in, right? It was loose. So I mean, we didn't want to contain them because social distancing. If you're done, get out of here. And then everybody kind of got really mad, like, why are they getting to leave? They're not even seniors. And then there was this like kind of hierarchy of like, you haven't earned it so there's a little bit of that still happening. But I think that it is a nice privilege when you've met all of the requirements and you're doing everything we ask you to do, and it's a lot. We ask a lot of our students. So to offer them a carrot after they've been so successful for 4 years, I think it is something for them to look forward to and stay bought in as you're leading up to that capstone year, right?
so how do you qualify for senior privilege? Like, if it's a privilege, how do you qualify for it? You have to ask for it, or do you have
So
to have
there's,
certain grades?
so every summer we
or-
send home, when we send home the schedules to the seniors, there's a whole thing. And you have to say like what your intended is, have you taken the SATs? It's like a senior worksheet, and then guidance reviews that. And then as long as they've done what they needed to do and they've done like whatever's on that list, it's like a checklist per se. That comes back to us. Once they know that they've done that, we meet with the seniors on the first day of school. We have the big meeting with them, set the expectations. If all of your documents are in order and you've done everything that you need to do, the second day of school, we do allow you to have your senior privilege. There are some seniors, surprisingly enough, that don't ever want it. They're like, no, just give me a study hall. I'm fine. I just want to stay there and stay locked in. You still have seniors that don't drive, right? So they have to wait for district transportation. So like, they don't want to like burden or ask somebody to pick them up. They definitely don't want their parent coming to pick them up at that age, right? So there's some other things that happen. So not every senior, I'll click back. There's only 203 seniors that have senior privilege. Our class right now is about 267. So like, there are some that they're still in the mix. They might be taking music. They may be just sitting in a study hall. So it's not, yes, it's very popular. I mean, the majority of them do want it, but it's not something that everybody does.
Originally, or way back, wasn't there some academic component to senior privilege? You had to have certain GPA, you had to have,
Not when I was there. We could ask Pete, I think Pete would absolutely know. His institutional knowledge is
I-
forever and a day. It goes all the way
I'm
back to
treading
the
a fine-
80s.
I'm treading a fine line here because Mr. Azar is about to say something about my age, but I recall.
I would never do that.
Yeah, here we go, here we go.
So
But,
there's no academic requirement?
Something sticks in my mind
I mean, as
about-
long as you're maintaining your, like, you
Yeah.
got to,
There's no, I thought, what I heard you say, and then what I just reiterated was, I thought you said, so there's no academic
No,
requirement.
but I'm
for
saying,
sin-
I think when it started,
a
there
GPA,
was.
he was saying like a GPA when you started.
Right, that's what I'm
I
saying,
think
and when he
there
said
was.
that, right, you're saying that there was, and.
Currently, there's no
there's
minimum
no-
GPA. As
Currently
long as
not.
you're not in a credit deficit, we allow you to have it.
That doesn't seem like a privilege.
This might be off topic, or,
I'm just saying, I mean, maybe.
I know.
No.
so I grew up in a city and we had a more open campus. I mean, this was a long time ago. Do we have any feedback from the community? Like, in terms of traffic, local businesses? I'm literally.
Coffee shops are booming.
Well, I mean,
Oh, yeah,
seriously.
they want to let them out.
Well, I'm legitimately asking because I don't know.
Noble Road is frustrated with us, I think, as, I get it. I mean, I do get it. I'm not, so, I mean, I think that is the feedback that I receive personally. They call the school and then, like, a red car just zoomed by, like, we get all of those calls. But in terms of economic impact, that is not something that we have explored, yeah.
No, I also meant traffic and all the things.
Yeah.
I have a few comments, right, and I've talked to you about some of this, and I don't mind being in the minority if I am on this. One of the things that I strongly encourage you to consider here is putting an academic component to the senior privilege. When I think of a privilege in the business that we are in, which is teaching and learning, mainly learning, then incentives ought to do with teaching and learning. And perhaps that's a little easier to manage, because what I'm hearing is, as I talk about where kids are either, staying in their car or staying on property, I'm not so sure that's a kid problem and not an adult problem. Like, it's our job to manage the situation. Ultimately, that we're responsible for it. I do believe that, the core components of the schedule may yield the outcomes you want, so I'm supportive of that. There are pushes that I push you on privately and/or publicly, like I'm doing now, in front of the board, and I don't say that in jest. I can do that. We know, and this is a good way to kind of articulate again publicly where we stand philosophically on this. So that's one, and I do understand, like, taking something and kind of scaffolding it backwards, so to speak. So, for instance, 9, 10, or in this case, 10th and 11th graders will not have privilege next year, right? So now we are with seniors, and I think it would be perhaps a little easier to manage if we looked at an academic component to it.
I would love to, and with support, I think it would be a perfect place to land on it.
The other is, I'm a fan of the math and writing clinic. Eliminate the word potential from it, okay?
Fair enough.
And math and writing clinic, when we think about MTSS, right, and the students that we know and we've identified as needing support, they can be scheduled into that. We've identified students who have a need, and we are creating areas to meet that need. I applaud that. There should be a math and writing clinic, and I think that you can have the autonomy to staff that, because these are two departments where you have a lot of folks and a lot of support to do that. So that's something that I would highly encourage you to do. And then finally, the final component was in the presentation, you had indicated, like, demonstrate they have the ability to take another course, and this is, again, another conversation that we have, and I have with the
Subjective.
board, is like, we're in the teaching and learning business, and I'm in the mindset that we should be learning
Yeah.
a majority of the time. So, who determines that a student can demonstrate the ability to? Because I mean, if to Emily's point, like maybe I've got some Emilys out there, and hey, I want to
There are no
take
Emilys
another
out there.
class because I'm self-motivated, right, to do that. In contrast to say somebody who may want to take a study hall.
Yeah.
So I think if I were to speculate, perhaps the students choosing 9 would be the ones that have a higher probability to be motivated, if that makes sense. Is that-
Yeah. And I think that those conversations probably start at home and who the child is as a learner. And I think, like, when I think about my own child, I know that her extracurriculars start at 3:30 and they don't end until 9 o'clock. So for her to put another class on her plate when she's not starting homework until 9 p.m. at night and she still has to eat and shower and do the thing, I don't want her up until 1 or 2 in the morning. So for us, that conversation at home looks a little bit different than another kid who may not have extracurriculars. I don't think that there's a playbook that defines who can do it and who can't do it. I think it's all about knowing who the learner is, knowing what the support is for that learner, both in the home and at the school, and then, working together. I think the homeschool connection that we've built over the last couple of years is strong, and I think counselors work in tandem with the families, and our students do a great job of articulating what they want, and I think if that is made known to the adults in their lives, that is a supportive decision that everyone can kind of come together on.
So if
And-
I did it, sorry.
I just
Fine.
have one more
Go
thing
ahead.
with- So I just want to throw out an idea. So like, I'm just trying to take all this in, because I've had issues with what I see happening at the high school, like from 2 to 3 o'clock, because I show up there for extracurriculars sometimes. And a lot of it, I get it, was COVID, everybody's getting out, and like, it's gotten better.
You've been
but-
in the field house a few times.
Yeah,
and
there's kids
yep.
running around that shouldn't be there, and so like and I agree with the idea of putting academic component on privilege, right? Absolutely agree with that. What about the idea of only giving it in the morning? Because the morning, you're gonna, like, the kids that are like burning both ends of the candle until whatever time, you're giving them the privilege to sleep in another hour, which is good for them. When you give that privilege at the end of the day, are there kids that are going to work?
There
Are there
are.
kids that are going to work out for their extracurricular? Are there kids that are going to practice orchestra? Yes. But there's also kids that are going out to sit in their car or screw around for an hour. It's not really, it's not
Yeah.
benefiting them. But I think the kids that take it in the morning, to me, are the ones that are like, I'm exhausted. I
I'm
would love
shot,
to have
yeah.
another hour of sleep.
I think at that age, when you're only looking at seniors, I think it's fair to give them the autonomy to decide what fits their schedule. I think a lot of our kids are working, at that age, and I think they're comfortable getting up in the morning because maybe they just go and
Yeah.
work a shift from 4 to 9.
Right.
And so I think we wanted to allow the choice because it's not a one-size-fits-all type of situation, and you have to do what's right for you as a student and for the family. So that's why we looked at either 1st or 9th,
Right.
just for the seniors.
So I think this is more like 3 random thoughts, I guess, not really, discussion. I think, I don't remember it being directly addressed in the original KCBA study we did on safety, but every transition period in and out of the school presents an opportunity for risk, right?
Yes.
So on one hand, you're decreasing by 50% the number of kids leaving the school, which is really where I think a lot of the risk is probably coming in, right? But on the other hand, you're doubling the times that you have movement. So I wonder if there's a way to coordinate that departure or arrival through one point of entry, right, together.
That is, since it is going to be limited to seniors, we could only allow them to exit what we call the faculty lot door and the English hall door, and that would give them access to the 2 main parking lots. That is something that we can consider and deploy just as a natural flow of traffic. It splits them out 2 ends of the hallway almost, so I think that can work nicely. So I appreciate that suggestion.
Second random thought, is there an opportunity for us to create an opt-out for a student who picked up the extra course and at the end of Q1 realized this is terrible, I really should be in a study hall? Is there a way to maintain flexibility during the start of the school year for somebody who took too much on?
So the one caution that I would provide to that is once they start a course and sit in a course, our integrity is we have to put that on a transcript. We can't act like it didn't happen. So to have it end up being look like a withdraw passing or a withdraw failing and have to have them then explain that to an academic admissions office or something like that, I don't want it to be like a magic wand, like, oh, oops, that never happened. I think that if you sign up for something, you should show up for something.
Can you offer pass-fail for those extra courses?
Seniors do have the opportunity to take 1 credit pass-fail. So it can't be in an AP class, and their GPA has to be higher than an 85, no? I can't remember, I think it's an 85. That's all done in guidance, so forgive me for not knowing
I'm just
specifically.
thinking in Greg's situation where it's pass-fail, then the,
The pressure's a little bit off,
well, the
yeah.
pressure's a little bit off, and you're not
It doesn't
suddenly
ha-
going to damage their GPA.
The
for-
GPA. Yeah, so we do currently already offer pass-fail for seniors, but you're only allowed, 1 credit to do that in. So it's either 2 like if you're taking semester classes or 1 full year class, so.
And my final thought was just thank you. I know we've asked 400 questions that weren't related to what you presented, but it stimulated a
I
lot of
feel like it's less
conversation.
questions than you ask KCBA, so we're good. I think you might have some questions on the clock still.
Awesome. So, yeah, I appreciate it. I think it's a lot of conversation that we should be having. So.
Yes, thank you.
In one of the slides up there, when you talked about this, one of the attributes that you liked was you have electives that have lower enrollment.
Yeah.
This would provide the opportunity
To raise those
increase
seat
that
counts, yeah.
through taking
Mhm.
more credit. So
Mhm.
I just want to name that,
Yep.
that.
Like, we
that-
see a lot of kids, and it's not included in the slide deck, but what tends to happen is, our world language program at the middle school is so robust, a lot of kids start, a little bit earlier in those languages. And colleges, depending upon if you're not gonna be like international business and have to include 4 years of a language or things like that, colleges are just happy to see that you had 3 years of a language. So some students wrap up their 3-year requirement for college. Abington Heights does not have a world language requirement for graduation. So they're already shopping like what colleges they want to go to. So what you'll see is kids not be completers in a world language because it's like, oh, I've met the minimum requirement for that post-secondary school. Now let me jump to my sciences and let me jump to this other thing that I'm actually going to maybe potentially pursue. So it'd be nice to have opportunities to see kids be completers in some of those capstone courses that maybe they dodge out of.
When you talk about electives and low enrollment, is it in more non-core related electives or core related?
It's a mix of both because when you consider that you only need 3 years requirement for our graduation requirements for math, science, and social studies, you'll see a lot of students not taking that 4th year of those core classes, to mince words a little bit. But you'll see in the spreadsheet, and Michelle, I don't know if I can click on this. If you want to click on that spreadsheet, you can see, and so these are all of the electives. I listed them. So like AP Lit, yes, that's an English class, and it could be a 4th year requirement. I listed them by section so that you could actually see the seat counts. And then I showed that if I were to take that class to 30, I'd have 10 empty seats. If I only took it to 25, I'd have 5 empty seats. If Dr. Koss it scrolls fast, so, I mean, it's long, so you could see all the different electives that I had listed there, and at the bottom of that, you could see on average for all of those electives. And so like you're not gonna see the freshman, sophomore, or junior required classes for any of your core areas, so every other elective is there listed. But on average, in our electives, if I were to take the classes to 30 seats, I'm about 13 seats per elective open. And if I was only gonna fill it to 25, I'm about 8 seats per elective open. So if we could fill those, we're providing more opportunities to students, but they can't get it in their schedule when I'm forcing everyone to have a study hall. So, but it's a certain type of learner.
So have we surveyed the kids across the board about what electives they might be interested in?
Like for the current schedule? Anytime. So we just did that
Anytime.
survey for
Not
social studies.
not social
Okay.
studies.
globally, if we were to add,
Globally, like, hey, what, if we could offer a course, another elective, what might interest you?
so when the departments do their rewrites, that is
Not
typically part of
outside
it,
that,
though.
not
Like media studies, I'm thinking, like, that's how media studies was born. It came out of a student initiative, like, English class was doing projects, and they're like, oh, they were doing like podcasts or something. They're like, this is really cool. Like, this would be great if this was a course, because all of the Instagram reels were getting really popular. And then 2 years ago, well, it's 3 years ago now, that's where media studies were born from. So I think while it hasn't been a formal study, like a formal survey, I think that that naturally happens as teachers are working on the front lines with students and then seeing what their interests are and then adding they come to us and say like, hey, can we add this elective?
So that would be the other push,
Yeah.
right? Perhaps it's a wrong way to describe it, but this is how I used to describe electives.
You have to
as
stay
sort of-
relevant, yeah.
Right, they're kind of Darwinian in that, you know, if you're offering electives and you're only having 7, 6, 10, I go back to economic models and things like that, then perhaps it isn't an attractive. And that's not to say it's not a good course.
Exactly.
But we go back to our customer to say, what might we provide you that would be of interest? And you have a list, and then you could then say, globally, we have people that may be interested, have the ability to teach it, and I would think that we may have a higher probability then to port more people in. So it wouldn't be something you would do this year, but it would be something that I would ask you to do before the end of the year so that you could have the opportunity to see that, and then as you get into the next year to kind of work through
Flesh it
that
out,
and
yeah.
workshop it, just like you said, and organically how media studies came about.
And we asked the teachers this year, this was the first year that I mandated as part of like Domain 4 for the teachers to kind of give feedback surveys to their students, even if it was anonymously, to really say like, what am I doing great? What do you like about this elective? What's missing? And, you know, the elective teachers really in a special kind of grouping, they have to keep their kids entertained, otherwise their seat counts go down and they put themselves right out of a job, right? So if you're not staying relevant to the students and you're not, and when we met in the curriculum committee and I talked about all of the relevancy that business was adding in because business is so evolving, I think they're taking feedback from the students, but we'll absolutely make a survey and just keep it fresh for everyone.
I think maybe, though, you have to be a little careful because their selection of that elective may have a lot to do with the quality of the teacher or reputation of the teacher.
For sure.
They may decide that they
If
really don't
so-and-so's
want
gonna
Dr.
teach it,
Shaver's class,
yep.
they want to be in Mrs. Henderson's class
Yeah.
because she's a much better teacher.
And this is why giving a survey, because it's all new. What would interest you?
Yep.
So that becomes a non-factor.
Yeah.
And when we do this, I would say you prompt the kids to think divergently,
Yeah.
right? So that I could say to Phil on my right, we could have somebody teaching a course about how you might leverage AI within engineering, within writing, within, like, because it would be something that's very fluid and would be changing on and on. In fact, if I were an English teacher, I would be, what is the impact on research alone? If I'm a student, and we have a lot of students that go on to post-secondary education, I would make the argument based on the readings that I've done lately is the post-secondary teachers are not only grappling with this, but they are now have reconciled this, that this is now a part of it, this is a heavy tool, how do we do this? Folks in engineering and mathematics have reconciled this from the computational standpoint to think about how do we leverage this
yeah.
to make greater moves, right? It's not about like, hey, you know, you can't have your formula sheet on your table, but how are you going to do this in order to kind of have a job, right? Or coding was push, but coding is changing rapidly. And now some people have effectuated that, and they've got coding courses that they don't want to get rid of, but yet it's so old,
Yep.
right? So I only say that as like a positive to your schedule because it could be something that's kind of
Yeah.
rapidly developing, and if it changes year to year, so be it. So have,
Yeah, and
you
I mean,
know,
I think like the
ChatGPT.
curriculum writing process too, and like the teachers are always eager to bring forth ideas that they're hearing organically from the kids. So, and that's why I feel like the last 3 years with the curriculum guide, my change sheet has been like 2 pages long, because I'm putting the power back into the student and the teacher to figure out what best fits our current, you wouldn't expect, I would not expect a teacher to pull last year's lessons plan to teach it to this year's students. So why am I expecting last year's curriculum guide and our structure to work for this year's climate and culture of our class? So I
Dr.
think
Koss said it's bedtime. I'm sorry. I got
it's fine.
excited
I'm
about
totally
courses.
way
I
past my
apologize.
No, I just think, I mean, I'm kind of taking in everyone's input and stuff, but, and I kind of keep coming back to, we live in this never enough culture where the kids are constantly pushed. It's never enough. They have to do more, be more. And I think that's great. You do have kids that are very high achievers. And to Mrs. Karam's point, this, for some of those kids, this might backfire a little bit. But the thing I hear, I have middle schoolers and high schoolers, like, and listening to their friends, they just feel like they don't have enough choice. They never get a break. So I think this really gives them flexibility, some autonomy. I do like the coming in, they can choose between first and ninth period, because, some of them are going to be student athletes who leave, and then they're not missing out on that. There's great opportunity available at the end of the day for local nonprofits. But I think we're giving kids, a gift of choice, so I didn't name any names. But I think that I think this will give the kids a little bit, of a push, because they feel like it's never enough. So it is, I mean, if they want to take that extra class, fine. If they want to study hall, I do think, like I said, as a parent, I know, like, when I can schedule a dentist appointment, I can just pull them at the end of the day and they're not missing instructional time. But I also think, like, it's going to be a huge mindset shift. Like, I think everyone at the end of the day, they're just like, it's almost as if we have 8 periods and then they're all, tell them whether they're leaving the building or not.
I was told to kick you.
It wasn't me. It was Warren.
Clowns. So
But
anyway,
thank you for your questions and your attention. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Tiani.
Thank you very much.
Are we like tabling the rest of the agenda?
I'd like to consolidate them all into one vote.
Making a
vote
motion
on-
to amend the agenda.
Proceed.
On Mr. Ackert, ask me items A through,
Niner.
can I get a second?
A second?
So moved.
All right, we're out. Thank you, everyone.
Whoa. So are we on the personnel
Yes,
report?
yeah. Mr. Ackert, ask the board to consider a motion to approve the personnel report as follows.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
And Mr. Acker?
Yes.
There's now only 7 of you, so 7,
It's a filibuster. Did I mention that?
Got to beat Cory
I thought
Booker.
that's what you were doing.
I was trying. Michelle's like, what is
25
happening? Mr. Acker, can I have a
to the circus.
motion? No, I don't even need a motion. Would the board
Approve the
consider
academic-
approve the Abington Heights 25-26 academic calendar?
So
Yes.
moved.
Second.
On the motion?
Second. Niner. Yes.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
And Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Acker, ask the board to consider a motion to approve Top Tree Works quote for the removal of the trees at the middle school.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
7-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf agreement for the 2025 extended school year program for student 2D and 3D.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
7-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the bid to appraise tax parcel 090200100021.
So moved.
Second. On the motion?
Niner in there.
Are you sure you got that number right?
Is there a niner in there?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Karam. Yes. Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
7-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the flexible instructional day 2025 PDE submission notification.
So
Yes.
moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Karam.
Yes.
Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Okay.
I'm going to take that as a yes.
Did he say yeah?
Our next item is a listing of the use of facilities. I'm sure this is, I don't know if anybody's gone through this. For the month of March, there are 11 pages of uses of our facilities, totaling like 150 or more uses. That's kind of amazing. Any unfinished business?
I just have a few things that I'd like to, no, I'm just kidding.
I have a few questions.
I think Cory Booker's, I think it's
retract
50,
that, I
I think it's
retract
50 hours you have to work on, Mr. Azar.
Brad, don't forget to go to the bingo on Sunday.
I'm going to the bingo. I'm going to the
There you
bingo.
go. Any new business? That's under new business, I believe. Any new business? I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Yes.